I saw an ant crawling across the street 3 doors down. So, I'm recommending full pest control remediation. It's like, well, we're not doing that.
Yep.
And so the investor goes, well, if you're not doing it, I'm not buying the property. Okay, don't buy the property. But I mean, it's like, it's a C-class property, and that's just it's gonna completely throw the numbers off, and it's not meaningful to this property class. So, sometimes the transparency hurts you too, but in the long run, it's like I said, we just got tired of dealing with the BS, and it's like, I just want to put it out there, and if people like it, great, and if not, great.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else. With your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grenzig. With me, as always, John Cohen. How we doing?
No complaints. Slow week.
Today's been slow.
Nothing's really happened. We had a end of year fun. A lot of moving parts, but
nice to last the year.
Yeah, exactly. Now I sat here today. I hit the refresh button on the email. I thought the internet was down. I said, "This is just a strange day. Not really nothing going on." So it was casual Thursday.
Awesome, but we got a good podcast. So we got some stuff going on today.
Mm-hmm.
Two really interesting guests into the turnkey model out of the Midwest or northern states, Michigan, Indiana. But I'll let them introduce themselves. So, guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
So, can you guys just, together or individually, just tell us, where you're from, who you are, how you guys met, how you got into real estate, and what you guys have been working on?
Yeah, I would start with this question because I'm the one who put the big pitch on Shecky to join the company and form the company. So
there you go.
I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Back when I was 19, I was in college. My parents, always were like, Jack, go to school, get good grades, study hard, go get a job. That was the model that they followed, and they were very successful in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of like the path they were, pushing me towards. And I went down an alternative path in college. My freshman year, a college student was handing out flyers about a network marketing opportunity. And, I started that back 22 years ago in nutrition business. So I built that business up part-time while I was going to college. And then when I graduated, it was $1 million plus in sales revenue. So I went into that full-time. And then about 5 years ago, we'd really built up a nice, cash flow and business with that operation. And I was looking for a way to invest my money. So I was in stocks, but stocks kept going, the way of what I always do in stocks, I buy high and then sell low. So I realized, I don't want to ride that roller coaster for the rest of my life. So it's just, I don't know. Just every single stock I bought, it went down. So
that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I know.
That's not the way they teach it.
Right, exactly. So they didn't draw it up on paper that way. And I just said, I don't want to ride this roller coaster the rest of my life. I want something that has, more stability and less variance. I like, steady, predictable growth and returns. I'm not the guy that needs to, go up super fast and then come down just as fast too, right? So I started studying real estate, started diving into podcasts. I specifically started, downloading podcasts about turnkey real estate because I thought, wow, this makes sense. I had no idea what I'm doing. So with the turnkey model, I can invest into a property where, other people have done all the heavy lifting. They've done all the acquisitions and the rehabs and the tenant placement and management. And so that was very attractive to me because I had 2 young children and I wanted, I didn't want to do any of that. So I started buying up and looking at markets around the country, and Indianapolis, Indiana just kept coming up as one of the top 3 to 5. Every single thing I read was Indy. And it happened to be, 2.5 hour drive from my house. So I'm like, this is cool. I could go check out this market. So I started really looking into it, then started buying up properties in Indy, and I really was getting fantastic returns. So I started sending friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, colleagues, everything to my turnkey provider. And in return, he'd give me a discount off of my properties. So I was getting some, I was starting to send in a lot of business. So it hit about, I think it hit about 5 million just in cash referrals that I sent to him. And that was right around the time where I realized, like, wow, there's a huge market for this, much bigger than just my sphere of influence. So this is at that time, I'm like, I need to scale this. I need to start a company, realistic, like not just selling properties or referring people to the provider. I need to start a company and take advantage of this opportunity. So at that time, I'm like, oh man, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this on my own. And that was when Shecky was my digital marketing coach for my nutrition business. So I one day we did a consultation call. I had him kind of give me some ideas of how I could market this new idea, this new company, to more, to scale it up to people that I didn't know. And he went through, and it was about, 90-minute, maybe 2-hour call, and he gave me this whole list of ideas. And then he sent an email recap after, just going over everything that we discussed. And I looked at that. I'm like, I can't do this on my own. I need help. So that's when I said, I didn't think about it too long, right? I'm like, this guy's got integrity. He's got the same values as me. He's great at sales. He's smart and he knows marketing. This is the guy I need to partner up with. So I sent him an email and said, let's do this, and then let's go. And so then I put the pitch on him to be my, business partner and 50-50 equity partner. So anyways, that's how we got started. And that was June of 2016. If we knew what we were getting into, we would have never done it. We would have never done this company. So it's
interesting.
Been a lot of ups and downs.
Gotcha.
And lot probably more downs than ups. But we're now, I think we're really in a really cool place. So I say that half kidding, half serious. We're in a really cool place right now with our company where we've got a lot dialed in, a lot of volume. We've got 14 properties under contract right now that should close within the next 2 weeks as of this recording. So we're really starting to catch some, real like momentum, and 2020 is, man, knock on wood, it's looking to be a great year. So anyways, I'll turn it to Shecky. You can kind of take it from there.
Wow, you stole all my thunder, man.
Right?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, what else is there?
So I am a complete screw up. I was the firstborn son of a fairly well-known rabbi, and so grew up as a clergyman's kid, and did a very good job never living up to the expectations of my parents, and had quite a bit of rebellion, and not good at school and very good at partying, and I excelled at partying, and but ultimately it forced me into being an entrepreneur. And I had some experience early on with network marketing, did all kinds of things, and had all kinds of sales jobs and a lot of different businesses, including some house hacking back in the 80s and 90s, and then also had a flipping business in the mid 2000s. Ironically started that in 2006, just before the crash of 08 and 09. So it was a really great time to start a flipping business. And I pretty much got my ass handed to me on a silver platter, and was living in San Antonio at the time, and then moved up to Austin from there because there was an incredible digital marketing community there, an incredible entrepreneurial community there that I wanted to be connected to, and did a lot of studying and worked on some projects, and that was essentially how I met Jack. We never really met in person, but like he had mentioned, I was consulting him in his other company and just teaching him some stuff about what he could do to grow his other company with the right presence online. And at the time, interestingly, I was not real happy with it wasn't even an employer. I was actually operating this consulting division under the auspices of another online advertising agency. And, the guy that owned the agency, it was a friend of mine, but they kept trying to mess with the whole arrangement that we had originally. They didn't want to write me the big checks that they were used to writing me for bringing in all this business. And I had already decided I wanted to go back to being self-employed, which was what I had been most of my adult life. So just for the heck of it, I just wrote some stuff up on my board, like, hey, this is what I want. I want to go back into being business for myself. I want to sell a high ticket item. I want to leverage my consultative selling skills. I want to leverage my digital marketing skills. And oh, by the way, I don't want to work alone. I want to have a business partner. So, when Jack presented it to me, which was just a shock. I mean, I was just helping a client out, just going like, okay, here's all the things we brainstormed about. Here's all the stuff we talked about. And he wrote back and said, okay, let's do it. I'm like, calling him up, dude, WTF, let's do what? I was kind of shocked, but it made sense. And then of course I out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking up at the notes that I had made on the whiteboard, which was maybe 6 to 8 weeks earlier. And I could barely read them in my little crappy left-handed chicken scratching, but it was like, wow, maybe this manifesting stuff really works, because obviously somehow I had put that out to the universe. This is what I want. And it came to me. So even though I had never met Jack in person, I had a really, really great feeling about him in terms of who he was, his value systems, his work ethic, things like that, just from having worked with him over the phone. And so it wasn't, once I really understood the magnitude of what we could hopefully accomplish together, it then became fairly easy to say yes. So the saying yes was the easy part. And like Jack alluded to, the building of the company has been the hard part. So probably true, just like any marriage. It's not that hard to walk down the aisle. It's like, what happens over the next few years, right? It's like, that's when the shit gets tough, so, but yeah, we've had a lot of crap thrown at us. And the way I look at it is, it's as horrible as it was. And we've run into some pretty significant bad luck, charlatans, all kinds of craziness in this business, but it has made us very tough, very strong, very knowledgeable about how things need to work in terms of processes and systems. And it's forced a couple of guys like us, who are really admittedly more sales and marketing type guys, to get these processes very, very dialed in. And that's what's allowed our company to be able to have the kind of volume and the success that we're currently experiencing.
Awesome. Thank you for both. Those are awesome stories to hear from both. I do want to back it up a little bit and spend just a few minutes on this, because I think it'll be interesting to hear, because I think a lot of people we talk to have started real estate in the last 7-8 years. And Schechter, you obviously alluded and said, you got your ass handed to you flipping. Can you talk a little bit, just, quickly, on what it was like, starting 2006, the flipping, getting hit like that, and how you were able to overcome it?
Well, overcoming it's a strong word. I mean,
that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not necessarily the language I'd be using here, but so, I'm an entrepreneur, and at the time I actually had sold off another business. I was actually in business with my brother and data processing company, and sold off my half to him. And I was pretty much done being his partner. And, we love each other, everything like that, but we just kind of had a parting of ways philosophically as far as the way we wanted that company to be run. I said, just pay me off, you take it, I'll go off and do other things. And I was just looking for something. And there was a guy that I knew from way back in the days when I used to sell cars back in the 80s. And he had a little construction business. And so we kind of put our heads together and said, hey, if you're the construction guy, you be the construction guy, and I'll be the, kind of the money guy. We'll buy a few homes in San Antonio, South Texas, things like that. We'll just flip them. And, it went fine, for a while, but there, obviously the market changed drastically. And I made a lot of really stupid mistakes, including having a lot of that stuff in my name. He wasn't really on the hook. He was a guy with, 3 ex-wives and 6 different kids. And our agreement on paper was that, as long as money was coming in, we would share it. If there were situations on any given property where we had to put money in, to pay a mortgage or, pay a hard money lender or whatever to keep a project going, then we would both share in that expense. And that was fantastic on paper until we got to month one, when we had to pay out month one. And this guy's, well, I don't have any money. It's like, well, what good are you to me? So, and then I later came to find out that he was skimming off the top on contracting fees and all kinds of other stuff that I was finding out from some of our subcontractors and things like that. So that turned out to be disastrous. And then, when the shit hit the fan, and the values of these properties dropped tremendously, and I was left holding everything. Mm-hmm. And so I was in pretty significant. I was within hours at one time of losing my own personal house to the courthouse steps. That's how far behind I was. And actually, I had some private loans on that house to people that were very close to me that had that happened, I would not have been able to pay off. So it was a pretty horrible situation. I was able to salvage my own home, but there were short sales done and a bunch of other stuff done. And then a lot of dancing to do with a lot of creditors and things like that. Thankfully, at that time, I never had to declare bankruptcy, but it's not like you could say that my credit was very good after that. So at that time, it was just like, okay, I've got to start over. And I pretty much had sworn off real estate. Like, I am never frickin' doing real estate again because it's too risky, and it's just, there's too many things that can go wrong, and there's too many bad seeds operating in that industry, and blah, blah, blah. And that's when I said, I'm moving to Austin to go start learning about digital marketing. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and you're kind of alluding to where I was going to go with my next question is, you got your shirt handed to you and all this stuff happened, and now you're even saying you sworn off, and then 6 years later, kind of comes full cycle and comes back to you. Can you touch on too that conversation, one of helping him out with this idea and the marketing side? Was it you heard this idea and you're like, oh, this is a good idea, and you were just interested? Or was it, until he came back and said, hey, I want you as my partner to help me with this, then you really started to think about it?
Well, as stated, I had already written some stuff up on my board, so I was in a mental frame where I was looking for a new opportunity. So that situation had already existed. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I had a tremendous amount of respect and trust for Jack for his values and work ethic and all that other kind of stuff. And even though I had sworn off real estate, the difference between the kind of person that I was in 08 and 09 versus the kind of person that I was in early 2016 is, it's not a brag. I'm just saying I was a different guy. And, it wasn't just a maturation issue, but I've been very involved in personal development for a long time. And as many people probably recognize, Austin is a very, very special place. And there's a very, very strong spiritual community in Austin, and just a vibe there that's hard to find in other major cities. I think that vibe is spreading now to the rest of the world, but it's very, very palpable in Austin. And so my years there, I went through some really, really tremendous growth in terms of my own personal development and my spiritual development. And even though I may have said, hey, I'm swearing off real estate, I wasn't so much of an idiot that I couldn't look at the board and go, okay, shit, this satisfies everything I was looking for. I mean, I just put it out there and here it is. So, and honestly, I had never really heard of Turnkey before. I mean, obviously, it's a very easy concept to understand. Mm-hmm. But once I kind of got a grasp on it and started understanding, what Jack was doing and, what he was referring, it's like, yeah, heck yeah, there's definitely a business here. And so, being the entrepreneur that I am, didn't take me very long to get very excited about the potential of the opportunity. And, it's taken a long time to be, excited about. Now we really have an opportunity because we've been kicked in the teeth a bunch the last 2-3 years. But it's been a wild ride. But, looking back on it now, although we had many times where we said, had we known what we were getting into, we probably wouldn't have done this. But it's getting to a point now with the successes that we've had recently that it's like, I'm starting to feel that less and less, because, we've got some really great clients and we've got some really great processes in place, and things are becoming more and more predictable.
Yeah, I think that's awesome to hear. It's actually pretty funny. A failure isn't a failure as long as you learn from it. And I think it's really interesting to hear how, you didn't say you were necessarily, smarter or better, but you were just in a different place. And I'm sure a lot of the experiences you had through that, few month window of, basically everybody got over leveraged in that time period.
Sure.
And, having to, pay the price for that. Luckily, you probably ended up a lot better than some other people. So, there's that to consider. And I think, you're probably taking that forward with you. And it's just funny because I was listening to an HBR podcast. It's Harvard Business Review. And they had a associate professor on talking about data in failures and successes, and how for the associate professors that more often than not, the associate professors that applied for grants early on and didn't get them and then continued to do it and continued to apply until they got it actually ended up being significantly more successful than the people that experienced that early success of the first time. They went in, got the grant the first time, and continued to go on. And not saying they didn't do well, but those early failures actually led to significantly more successes. But the key component was continuing to apply yourself and continuing to fail until you experience those successes. So it's very interesting to hear you guys talk right now that it sounds like, whether it's going back to the flipping or even just the start of this business, running into, I don't want to call them failures, but maybe problems is the better word for it, that it sounds like you guys have continued to push through those and have started getting that taste for success. And I think it's a very interesting place for you guys. And I'm very excited to hear more about it. So, we've heard a lot from Shecky. So Jack, maybe you want to chime in a little bit, tell us a little bit more about, you're doing these turnkey properties on your own, with your own money through somebody else. And you're starting to, probably pick up a few, and then you start referring business. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like for, referring people, seeing that opportunity and then starting, kind of your own company a little bit more of like, what was the light switch for you where it's like, hey, I can do this myself?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I was just going to add on to what you were just saying about failure. I was just at a sales conference this past weekend for my nutrition company. I'm still very much involved in that. Awesome. It's a very big business, and it's certainly still a passion. And one of the top sales leaders was on stage saying, "Look, the opposite of failure is not success." Mm-hmm. The opposite of failure is quitting. So he said the only way to get to success is to have repeated failures. And the quicker that you can fail your way forward, the faster that you're going to reach success. So the only ones that truly, fail, those are the ones that just, they gave up. So I think that was really, for Shecky and I, there's been certainly been points over the last 3 years where we were on the brink of like our company no longer existing. We had many times where we had to sell a property off to get the cash to fund another rehab to finish for, an investor to keep our word. So we'd had to sell a property, liquidate a property to then create the cash to meet payroll. So we are definitely, like no strangers to to failing forward, and we've done it in massive amounts. So, when I first started this, all I wanted to do, and like Shecky said, I'm a sales and marketing guy. Like the last 20 years, that's all I've done. I'm not a supply chain type of guy. I'm certainly no expert in rehabbing and construction and, construction management and taking a project from, this dilapidated property to get it to a really nice, nice looking performing property that a tenant's going to want to move in and desire. Right. So I was just kind of naive to what that whole process was really like, the supply chain. So I'm over here just like loving the returns that I'm getting and super excited about it. I'm sending all, like I said, like friends, family, coworkers to this provider and just letting him handle all of that stuff without really just trusting him and not really verifying a whole lot. of what he was doing.
Interesting.
So we get to this point where, I've got to probably have, I don't know, 30, 40 clients, 130, 150 units total that have been referred and that are under management. I'm starting to get commission checks from them as well, marketing fee, type of, payments for all the, business that I'd sent in. And then I just started to, and that's right around when Shecky came in, and we just started to see some things that just didn't really add up. We had some really uneasy feelings. It's very disorganized. We thought it was much more of a disorganized, chaotic type of environment than we did think it was fraudulent, right? So eventually, though, the wheels came off his whole operation, and it turned out he was paying out some fake rents. The rehabs that he was supposed to do didn't actually really get done. So, it's pretty easy to have a profitable company, when you're supposed to put 40 grand of rehab money into a property, but you put 10 in instead. So, and you just put lipstick on the pig, so to speak, right?
Sure.
With the carpet, the paint, you make it look good in the pictures. But what we found out after everything, kind of collapsed and we unwinded the whole situation was that the bones of every property were really messed up. You're talking every single property had problems with electrical, plumbing, foundations, roofs, needing to be replaced. Just every single CapEx type of major expense really had to be addressed. So we had to go through this whole process of not only trying to, bring new investors in and to sell properties to make a profit to stay in business, right? But we also had to divert a lot of attention over to trying to take care of the existing investors that were under the original turnkey, providers kind of infrastructure, right? So that was, incredibly stressful, challenging, especially when you when you think about it, all of a sudden we've got to help our clients figure out how to rehab 130 units, and we have no construction teams whatsoever under us, none. Right?
Yeah.
So
Sounds
that's
easy.
it's a major problem, and but we just Shecky and I just banded together, stepped our games up. We went through several more contractors that were bad before we got to the ones that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And, now we have some very, very in the trenches trusted teams that, these guys are incredible. So, it's all worked out, but, I think if you really boil everything down, what mistakes we made, we were too trusting and we didn't verify. So in real estate, I think that's very important, especially when you're talking about how many, sharks that are out there and also how much money's at play. You better be verifying everything with third parties and all that.
And that's something that people talk about, and I think people think they do enough, let's call it due diligence, but I think in the end, a lot more people are going on trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I couldn't agree more. The verification of what's going on is one thing that, I made the mistake myself. We did it, we had a flip in Charleston, a property manager who I love, whose husband, we had a not unsimilar deal to something that Shecky did. It was, I'll put up the money, I signed on the loan. He fucked the deal up 17 ways from Sunday, and it was a disaster. I was shelling out a mortgage payment every month, and I would go to him. He's like, I don't got any money. What do you want me to do? I'm not paying it. Your name's on the mortgage. Now, he never said that, but we ended up selling it, and I just basically did anything I could to get it, take a loss. I don't care. Just get rid of the property. It was on a level of trust. But even, I've been doing this since 2009, 2010 when I bought my first property. Looking back, I bought a lot of deals under the, trust me, and it worked. And even today, I'm the most skeptical person in the world. And there are some times I look back, I'm like, that was really stupid. I need to do a little bit more. And I think that there's, everyone says it, but I think that, you guys, I love, I think anyone that does this full time, you got to beat yourself up a little bit. And, you guys are talking about, yeah, we made some mistakes if we didn't know it. I think you have to have that personality because not everything's going to go according to plan, and you got to be able to have some fun with it. But, speaking to the level of verification, I don't think anybody does it nearly as much as they should because, so many things can go wrong. And I think people, when it goes right so early on, so many times, it's like that, even, 3 years later, you still have to do it. And, maybe it's a spot check, but I don't think that's done nearly enough. And to be aware of that is important. And as you have your business, it's super important to have.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt for a minute because I want to put an asterisk on what you just said. I agree with you 100%. I feel what's gone on because, this is coming from my frame of like digital marketing guy, right? So the internet has created this situation with us as human beings where here's the whole world. We just served it up to you on a silver platter. And it's made people into, armchair quarterbacks, just super lazy.
Yep.
It's false. And that too, even in our business, it's like, that was a really easy sale. I mean, that guy even barely looked at anything, And so it's like great that he saw a lot of our content and we built some trust previously, obviously, and that's great. But so what we did I just sort of not, in other words, not allow an investor to be their own worst enemy in that regard. We've built this like, if it were a physical product, it's an extremely thick investor folder on each property. So we go through everything that we did. Like we give them a full scope of repairs. We show them exactly what we did. We show them all of our checklists. We call in a third-party inspector to go over that thing with a fine-tooth comb. We share the inspection with them. We'd send our crews back in if there was anything that they missed on the inspection to cure any of those remaining items. Before pictures, after pictures, all this kind of stuff. And then when we turn it over to our property managers, we have a great relationship in them in that we insist, and they insist as well, on doing this quality control piece after all that's done. So then they say, well, what needs to happen in terms of that property becoming habitable? And now here's our recommendations for final cleanup or, add an appliance here or that sort of thing, or do a little more touch-up paint here. And then we're paying them again, even after our contractors, to bring their crews in to do that final. So when that thing gets ready to be put on the market to tenants, I'm not saying it's perfect. There's no property that's perfect, but it's in really, really good shape. But more importantly, there's a documentation of everything that's happened. So even if somebody was lazy, all they got to do is open up the folder and read through it.
Yep.
It's not like they got to go out and do all this other due diligence. It's almost like we've served up the due diligence for those people that are lazy. And for the people that are not lazy, the feedback that we get, which has been great, is like, man, you guys are really thorough about this stuff. Like, I don't really know what else I need to look at. It's like, Don't look at anything. Here's a purchase agreement. You can look at that. Sign here.
No, 100%. So you're spot on. It's, if you can give the level of detail and understand that, then that's what I was just talking about. But some people just go on I got it, we're good. But no, that stuff's great. I mean, giving people, not to offend anybody, but if I do, I don't care. Making it idiot proof, right? Like, this, here it is. It's you could do nothing. You can't point the finger at me and say I didn't do it because I'm giving this signed, sealed, and delivered. So, no, that's important.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting too when you were talking about rehabs for 10 to put lipstick on a pig and not handling the basic stuff. We see that all the time in the multifamily stuff where it's, a deal's for sale with a broker or listening to owner expectations. And it's like, well, the deal around the corner sold for 80 a door or a 5 cap. So I want that. And it's like, well, that deal around the corner, they just blew out the clubhouse. They just fixed all the siding and the roofs and your shit's about to fall apart. It's not the same where, especially now where you're talking about the internet and stuff, it's, oh, look at the pretty pictures of the interiors. They put in granite and stainless steel, so I can do that. And it's like, well, maybe you can, maybe you can't, because there's more stuff to, there's not enough associated with, the level of access, right? The flow of the apartment as you get into it, right? How do the grounds look? What's the parking situations like? And I think a lot of that stuff has been removed now because there feels like there's less and less of a need to actually go and experience the properties. And it's way more of like a, miles away view, right? We're in New York and we buy stuff in, Florida, the Southeast and the Midwest. It's, a lot of that stuff gets discounted in the world we're in. So it was very interesting to hear that you had something very similar, whether it was cynical or not. I don't think ours is necessarily cynical. I think it's just, greedy people trying to get the best price they can. But it was just interesting, to kind of hear those parallels. And I think it's super, credit to you guys that you've been able to, realize that problem, right? You came across this problem with, the failure you guys had, and you're able to, put something together that basically says, hey, we had this problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. We're going to continue to fix it going on. And I think that level, the greater level of comfort you can give people, right? Removing those obstacles is just going to continue to generate more business and more attention for you guys going forward. So I think that's super impressive to hear. And from what you're saying, it sounds like that's been a high level of great feedback that you guys have gotten from that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it is just like from a selfish reason. Like when we look at how much work it was to try and deal with 130 problem properties at the same time that we're trying to keep a company afloat. I mean, and you start dealing with the flack that you're getting from investors and that kind of stuff. I think part of it is motivated selfishly. It's like, dude, I just don't want to mess with this shit anymore.
Yeah, you don't want the headaches.
I can't sleep at night.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
let's just give them everything, because there's it's the 80-20 rule, right? There's 80% of the people that are not giving them everything and not being transparent and all that. There's maybe 20% of the good guys or gals. I'm not trying to be sexist, but 20% of the good ones are actually doing things right, but 80% of them are not. I mean, I'm across all strata of real estate.
That's life. So that
Brokers,
80-20
investors, everybody, right?
I say that all the time. I say, people are like, oh, you give so much information away. It's like, 80%, I go extreme. I say, 95% of the people are going to take the information and do nothing with it. So if 5% people take the information and do it good, then that's what matters. Because most people do such a shitty job that if you do a good job, it'll sell itself. It does what it has to do, but organically. You just gotta, like you said, you have to go to bed at night. So if you buttoned it up 100%, you can go to sleep at night. You're not going to get that call of you didn't put plumbing in, but all the fixtures are done, right? Because it's it's all documented, it's all done. We didn't cut corners, and I think that's what matters and resonates with clients, investors, whoever it may be, and that's the important stuff.
Yeah, and we've, obviously we've lost deals sometimes by being overly transparent. It's like, well, like for example, you get an inspection report, and some of these inspectors are a little bit overzealous, and they put stuff in an inspection report like, well, I saw an ant crawling across the street 3 doors down, so I'm recommending full pest control remediation. It's like, well, we're not doing that.
Yep.
And so the investor goes, well, if you're not doing it, I'm not buying the property. Okay, don't buy the property. But I mean, it's like, it's a C-class property, and that's just it's gonna completely throw the numbers off, and it's not meaningful to this property class. So sometimes the transparency hurts you too, but in the long run, it's like I said, we just got tired of dealing with the BS, and it's like, I just want to put it out there, and if people like it, great, and if not, great.
Awesome. When you guys were experiencing, and it sounds like, Jack, it was a lot more towards you, when you were experiencing that period of, all right, we think things are starting to not go correctly with I think you said like 30, 40 clients you'd referred to the other company. How did that process work? Did they transfer their quote unquote, I guess, management over to your new company? Did you just get involved with the old company? How did that process work, and how did you play it out?
Well, we didn't have a management company to transfer them over to, so we would have done it earlier because we saw the signs of this is like I said, something's not right. This isn't on the up and up. All of that, or instinctually, we knew that the day was going to come where we were going to have to shift all of those clients to a new management. We didn't have one at that time. So, and the ones that were out there, what we were seeing in the market is that they were marking up, repairs and maintenance to, such huge levels that the investor was just going to get eaten alive and have no chance at cash flow. So we, partnered with a couple guys that had been in the, Indianapolis market for a couple decades, and had them, they started up a property management division so we kind of had, it was almost like in-house, but we didn't have any equity in the company.
Right.
So that we had someone to then transfer over the 30 and 40 investors, right? We thought we'd have, we started that partnership in January of 2018. And so we thought we'd have, a good solid year to kind of get this company going. Well, the shit hit the fan 3 months later in March when an email went out to all the investors, essentially saying from the guy who actually held the license to the property management company. Turns out the guy that we thought held the license didn't have one. He was operating under another guy's license. Well, that guy didn't like what he was seeing. So he sent an email out to all investors and said, I'm taking over the property management for all these properties. Well, when that happened, every single investor that were getting, let's say their rent dropped by 80% the next month. So it's like, well, how does that make sense? Did all of a sudden, 1 month later, all these tenants just stopped paying because they went to a new property management company? So that's when we really realized, like, okay, man, this is crazy. Why would you send out fake rents to investors? Well, he was trying to get them to buy more properties, right? Mm-hmm. When you're getting some really huge returns, you're just going to keep buying and referring people.
So wrong. That's so bad.
It's bad. It was bad. That's when everything kind of crashed, and that's when we just went into, okay, what do we got to do? And here's what we did. I think this is an important philosophy for anybody to take in life. We said this. We said, look, it's his fault. It's his fault. This guy, he did all this stuff that was not on the up and up, and all that. But we took responsibility. So the big question is fault versus responsibility. Yes, this person wronged us. Yes, this person, did some really bad things, right? But it was our responsibility, we can't rely on him to fix it. We had to take 100% responsibility for it, and we had to fix it. So that's what we did. And look, I think that when you take that kind of stance, I just feel like, karma, universe, God, whatever your beliefs are, comes to your side, and you'll get a good outcome. And that's what we have at this point. I feel like, karma's coming back around, and now, we've pulled in a fulfillment client that we swore we'd never use a fulfillment company, that we'd always just sell our own stuff to investors. But we have an incredible fulfillment company that just contacted us out of nowhere. And, we're fulfilling a lot of properties through them, to have another source of outlet to sell property to. So, yeah, it's been incredible, like what's transpired by just doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think if you put good out into the world, good is going to eventually come back around, whether you think it's something else or not. I just think, when you do good stuff, people eventually hear about it, whether you see people talking about it or not, and word gets around, especially in the real estate community. It's not that big of a community. You're 2 people away from being connected to almost anybody in this business, whether it's multifamily, turnkey, land, flips, whatever. It's not too hard to get in touch with anybody in this business through referrals. So I think if you do something like you did, where you take on that responsibility and you do right by other people who put your trust in you or somebody you were working with, not right away is that going to play out, but over, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, that's going to play out, because it's going to get around little by little by little, right? The negative stuff gets out quick, right? Because that shit spreads like wildfire. But that positive stuff, when you take that on and you start doing right by people, and, you fix those problems and you own up to things and you tell people how it is, that's not something that's going to, translate right away, but over months, years, decades even, that's the stuff that I truly believe is really going to play out. So that's really, really awesome. What do you mean by fulfillment? Because I didn't fully understand that.
So we have a company that, like, for the longest time, we swore off having anybody wanting to take our properties and take them and mark them up and sell them to their investor base. So, just putting in the environment, say, of like digital marketing or marketing in general, we all know that there is, and maybe your listeners don't know this, but there is a big difference between, let's say, a turnkey provider and a turnkey promoter. There are hundreds of promoters out there, and there are all these big real estate networks and gurus and educational things and the seminars and all that stuff that we're all familiar with. But most of those entities don't do any kind of acquisition and rehab. Right? They just have a lot of people that think they're great and they're gurus, so they'll buy anything that they're peddling. And for the most part, what they want to peddle is stuff like what we provide, because we're doing all the heavy lifting. We're doing all the hard work. We're going out and acquiring the property, doing all these great rehab process, having a third party inspection, proving that it's good. There's not that many people that actually can do that. I mean, there's plenty that attempt it, but there's not that many that can actually do that and dial in those processes. So for the longest time, even when we weren't doing that well, we would always have these promoters reaching out to us and say, hey man, we'll sell all kinds of your properties for you. And we would look at that and go like, okay, great. Like, what do you bring to the table? Well, we're going to bring a sale. It's like, well, that's okay. So let me get this straight. You're going to take our property, you're going to mark it up, add no value to the investor. You're just increasing the price, so thereby reducing their return. Then you're going to strip us of our branding and you're going to take all the credit. And by the way, you're going to put more markup on it than what we do for doing all the heavy lifting. It's like, I don't think so. I'd rather have a small company and not do that. Yep. So let's just grow organically and figure it out. So eventually, after we went through this divorce with this more recent guys last year, or as we were going through it, I met a gentleman that had pieces of ownership in, like you say, you're only 2 degrees of separation. I met a very key guy who had a lot of pieces involved in a lot of the different arenas surrounding real estate investing, meaning like the cost segregation tax work, the self-directed 401k IRA stuff, LLC setup, all that other stuff that goes towards making into, better investments, financial planning, et cetera, et cetera. And they approached us and said, hey, we would like to take your properties, and yes, we're going to mark them up and resell them to our investor base. However, here's all the value that we add to our investors. Here's all this really cool shit that we're doing. And we're helping these people develop some really awesome strategies for wealth. And I love what they do. I mean, they're really, really good at what they do. And so we, finally said, this is a company that we don't mind having as a fulfillment client. This is a company we don't mind providing properties for because they do provide so much value. And so, as Jack alluded to, that's now representing a nice chunk of our business. And for us, it's great because they buy a bunch of properties from us every month, and that gives us a lot of financial stability then, because we know we're always going to have a certain amount of sales that we can then go out and market our brand, grow our brand, do our stuff, come on your podcast, do our podcast, all the other cool stuff that we're doing. So it's great.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. First of all, how you found a partner that, aligns with you, and, the same way you guys found each other, same thing. When you guys were looking at, this company that came in, is there any reason you didn't look at it and say, hey, if they can sell these properties for X additional markup, call it 10 grand for argument's sake, is there any reason you didn't look at it and say, hey, we can do that as well, but that allows us to hire somebody to then go out and do this and keep it all internal, whether it's, another partner or, a director of, disposition, whatever you want to title that person or whatever you want to give them. was there any thought process of bringing somebody in, and why ultimately did you decide to go with this company instead?
Well, the answer is kinda. Like obviously as entrepreneurs, we're always going to ask that question.
Of course.
Can we do it better ourselves? All that kind of stuff. But they have so many different things in place, and there's so many different entities involved in the services that they provide for investors that it would take us probably 2 decades to build that out. This is not just something like adding another property or two. That said, there is a couple of pieces to what they do that we're currently looking at possibly doing some stuff ourselves. Mm-hmm. I don't think that it would necessarily increase our pricing, but it would add another revenue stream for us, which is obviously always great. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, I mean, we've had all kinds of cockamamie ideas. I mean, we had a couple of guys on our podcast that were talking about, like infinite banking and investing out of like a whole life policy and all that. And it's a really fantastic strategy. I'm not trying to minimize that. That's a whole nother 7 podcasts if you want to talk about it. So Jack and I had a bunch of conversations like, well, shit, I mean, this is a whole life policy. Why don't we do that? We'll make the commissions. We had a conversation for a while there going, Jack, if you remember, about us going out and becoming licensed insurance agents. By the time after you've rolled that around in your noodle for a while, it's like, dude, I'm learning all kinds of stuff every day, but I don't really want to start going through that amount of studying and doing all that. And it's so much effort and so much focus that it takes us away from our core business.
So what you just said, I say it all the time because people come over to me. They're like, well, you can provide this for people. I said, if I do that, I'm not doing what I do really well. And it's, yes, there's a level of, and it's great you found the partner that provides the value you want them to provide. And I think that's the ultimate goal. And it's not always about, maximizing dollars. Of course, as an entrepreneur, I sit at home sometimes. I'm like, oh, I got a great fucking idea. And I come in the office and I'm all amped up about it. I'm like, wait, that's really stupid. But, or it's going to take so much more time to do. But, like you said, it takes away your focus, and that's what you do really well. And that's, how I feel about that. It's like, yeah, personally, I think when, anytime I speak to someone on a podcast or I meet somebody, I'm like, if I wanted to do it, I would do it just as good as them. And then I sit back, I'm like, but they're doing it really well. Why do I want to mess with that, right? If I have someone that's looking for that product, hey, here's an introduction. It's easier to do that for me to provide value than to try and do everything myself, because then you become a jack of all trades. Maybe you're really good at it, or maybe you suck at all of them. Jury's out, but I think that's important, just understanding what you do well and doing that and not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, interestingly, you ask any reasonably successful entrepreneur, like, what's your biggest asset? Your biggest asset's your own bandwidth. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, as you start getting busier and growing a more successful company, that bandwidth automatically is going to get pulled in a million directions with or without great ideas. And when we made the decision to get out of the property management business last summer and said, hey, we aligned ourselves, we had formed a really amazing strategic relationship with our present partners. We were looking for an entity that just completely had their shit together. We knew and we saw and we experienced, both in terms of the mom and pops of the world, the Scheichters of the world, us trying to do it ourselves, whatever, that unless you at least have a couple thousand doors, you don't have enough economy of scales to really service the investors the way we wanted them to be serviced. So we just said, hey, you know what? We're really awesome at acquisitions. We have all the relationships in place. We're buying in volume. We got 5 amazing crews. We've got, we're excellent at rehab. And we're good at sales and marketing too. Let's just do what we do best. Screw doing property management, even though we are definitely going against the grain of what the industry's expectations are. So in the world of turnkey, there's this mantra out there that you're not really a turnkey company unless you own your own property management company. And we've proven through our history that nothing could be further from the truth. That's really just a bunch of bullshit, and it's really just a bunch of marketing. So we have a far better system now in place without us being the property managers themselves, and the investors are far better served, and they're put into a much better position for long-term performance.
I was going to say that's probably like you said, it's an industry bullshit, but I think that could be a competitive advantage, right? Like if, hey, we're going to buy it, we're going to rehab it, we're going to do that, we're going to sell it, but we know these guys are going to do it better than we can possibly do it right now. It's going to put your investors and your clients in a better position than, oh, we're going to hire our own internal person. It's like, it also gives a separation where if something goes asshole backwards on the management side, your investors come to you, but they also know that, it's not your brand. It might be tied to you, but there's no equitable interest. I think that's something that, like you said, it's, industry, we do it all. But you guys are basically doing it all, but you just have a third party who does it much better. I think that's good to know, and it's knowing your strengths.
I actually think it would be a really interesting debate, like somebody who has it and who doesn't, because I can see the argument for both sides of the coin, right? Because you're saying, hey, like you just said, hey, they're going to do it better than I can. Why am I going to build it out? And it's also, hey, they're, maybe they're not providing as much of a service as we can provide. So I actually think that would be a fucking really interesting conversation. Somebody on your side, I think it would be really interesting to hear that.
Quick question: when you guys on the management side, do they third party manage for other people?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a company that does 10,000 doors nationwide, and look, they just have the resources in place that staff wise and teams and systems and everything that that we would take us several years to build out to get what they have. So. And I agree. I mean, I think there are some great turnkey companies out there that do have it in-house, and they're, for those investors, they may be better served. However, what we've seen with those companies and what we know being on the inside, right, is that they mark up their properties a substantial amount more than we do, so that they have the cash to be able to service the clients post sale with the management.
That's what my initial reaction was, because I know when I shit talk Turnkey, I say they buy for cheap, they rehab, right or wrong, I don't argue that. They sell for a markup, and then they manage it. They make money the whole way up. I always say, there's can they do it a little bit cheaper and have a better product and still make money? Maybe yes, maybe no. But that's when it's a true internal operation. I said they buy for 10 cents on the dollar, they sell for 95 cents on the dollar. Oh, and then they also manage the deal for a profit. So they're making money all the way, but they have to support all the roles in the staff. So like I said, I think it would be a great debate, but I can definitely see your point and say, hey, listen, no, we're, this is what they do. And, we're going to still do the right stuff. And whether we sell for 90 cents on the dollar or 110 cents on the dollar, it's not, that's irrelevant, but you're going to get great service. And I think in the end, anytime you're taking investors' money and you're putting them into a product, you want them to be best equipped with the best team to provide them with whatever they need for their investment. I think that's the part that makes the most sense, and not just doing stuff, to pay people to do it the right way. Now,
everything comes down to what's the investor experience, right?
Correct.
That's who we're serving. At the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters is what's their experience with communication, post-sale, and what kind of ROI are they getting.
Correct.
If those two are great, then I don't think it really matters whether you have it in-house or you outsource it.
I agree with that.
Doesn't matter. It's a moot point.
Yeah, it's something ironic that happened too. Is when we had our previous guys that we were sharing an office with, and we were in the same office, so we thought that we had a lot of oversight into the whole property management situation. Now we're working with this national team, many employees, whatever, and it's a very high tech company, and they've written all their own software. We have way more oversight without officing with these people than we did then.
That's true.
Just because those guys sucked, and their level of communication was horrible, and their systems were bad, and all that other kind of stuff. And I don't want to turn it into a bitch session, but when somebody does something right, I mean, like we have a weekly meeting with our PM team. We see how every investor is performing. We get reports. We can go online. We can go onto the portal. It's amazing the stuff that they've put together for us, and the onboarding process and all that. So it's they do have a local presence here. It's not to say that they don't have an office in Indianapolis. They do, but they're also national, and they're also operating in other markets that we're growing into. So we're very excited that we systemized that whole thing. It's really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good parallel to literally the conversation John was having with Doug and Megan in our office about we've been looking more at like, small scale, like trying to put our toes into some land stuff and some mobile home stuff and potentially some Airbnb stuff. And they're having a conversation about like, oh, we could do this and we could do this and branching off of that. And she said something like, oh, there's so many opportunities. And I think it's directly parallel to your point about, yes, there's all these ways you could branch off or service other things in these areas. But if you don't focus on that one thing and build it up, you're going to be too off in too many directions. And I think it's so apparent in when you see these super successful companies where they build up, 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 and up, they get to the number one in their industry and they can't expand any further. And then they just start to buy other companies. Like you look at Amazon bought Whole Foods. You look at Coke and Pepsi buy Dasani water and vitamin water and all these other things because they just exploded, got as big as they could in their one little sector. And then they said, okay, let's go out and buy other things to expand because we've hit the ceiling basically, and we can only go so much further. So I think it's really interesting to hear you guys take that very similar mindset and approach to it.
Yeah, I also think that we're, as technology progresses, we enter into an era where there's more and more specialization.
Absolutely.
So a good analogy, like here in Indianapolis, the Roche Diagnostics has a big office. There's a lot of drug companies in Indianapolis for whatever reason, but Roche, as we know, is a testing company for new drugs that are coming to market. But even though they've got hundreds of employees in this huge office here in town on a major freeway, they only do about 2% of their testing in-house. So what they're doing is the actual testing of the product, they're actually outsourcing to testing companies that are specific to testing that kind of a drug or that kind of a delivery system. So they're still the testing company, but they're not even doing any of their own testing. Yep. They're farming it out to people that are better than them at it in a very specialized way. Yep. So same concept. And I think any company in this day and age that's going to be successful, forget about real estate, whatever, just any company, it's important to look at that and leverage that situation.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. Awesome. I think that's a awesome place to wrap it up. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. I think you guys gave a ton of insight, knowledge into real estate, building a company, turnkey, all that stuff. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, any resources you guys have, tell them where they can find it.
Well, our company is called, as you can see right behind me, High Return Real Estate, and everything is branded to that. So you can go to highreturnrealestate.com and you can look at properties, all that stuff. There's also a link there to our podcast, and the podcast is called The High Return Real Estate Show. Imagine that. And that's on all the major podcast channels too, but you can also find that on our website. But yeah, we're easy to find.
Awesome.
Thank you much. Oh, wow. Thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Enjoyed the interview. It was awesome.
Thanks, guys.